So, sovereign models. If I ask each of you, what's a sovereign model? How many of you actually have an answer for that? Well, lucky that we have Ridhima, who has. So what is a sovereign model? What are we talking about here?
Well, I think I'm not sure how many of you stuck around and heard, what the keynote was before. But I think sovereign models are something that is specifically individual per nation, right? In a sense that it's ethical, it's cultural, it's governance run, and specific to each country that has them.
And why are they important? Why should we have a sovereign model?
I think something we also touched upon earlier was that LLMs are literally scraping data. It's not ethical data. And it's very important for each of these models to be accessing ethical data and not just be scraping the internet, to be able to come up with something true, that's individual, that captures cultural nuances, that has specific guardrails in place, that has specific governance in place, that is responsible. People are using these stuff in everyday lives. So, we have to be relying on them to be coming up with something that is truthful.
So, Paul Trillo, he's the Senior Creative Director at Asteria, as we heard. And he's also an artist in residence for the company. And you've probably broken more models than all of us combined by trying them out. How do you see sovereign models in your work? Is there a difference?
Yeah. So the last year we spent partnering with Moon Valley to build a model from the ground up, a foundational model, trained completely on paid for licensed data. So not even public domain, but things that where everyone that contributed to the model was actually compensated, and then allowing other people to build on top of that. And I think it's important to be able to have a sovereign model, to have that kind of source that is clean from the ground up. And I think for artists to be able to build on something that they feel is commercially safe and isn't impeding on infringing on other artists' copyright. I think as it relates to what we do at Asteria, it really is about representing different people's voices. Everything we do is trained with, starts with original art and original source data. So it's not like we're just dipping our toes into the big valley of these large models and hoping that we're going to get something very specific out of it. The way you get something specific out of it is providing your own material and building with your own material. And so for people across the globe, in order to have that specificity, it's really important to kind of collect your own data, to build your own data sets, the old-fashioned way, going out and shooting things, drawing things, animating things, so that your fingerprints, your DNA is kind of represented into the final pixel.
So your view, sovereignty is about kind of artistic representation and kind of right to control and own, and then of course reproduce your own sort of handprint. And for you, it's more about sort of a cultural sovereignty and the models being able to depict sort of cultural different features in an appropriate manner. Alex, you guys are building voice models or cloning voices. What does sovereignty mean to you in your work?
To add to what's been said, which I obviously agree with, we also been touching digital likeness as an asset, as a new asset that's been formed in the industry with the appearance of the technologies that can actually detach a human from their likeness. And therefore, when we think about sovereignty, we think about digital likeness component of it, where someone likeness could not be used without their permission. If their likeness was used, it should be compensated. If it was used with their permission, along with the training material that was used on top of the models that were trained from ground up to be ethical.
So your solutions have been used in some major Hollywood productions like Emilia Perez and Brutalists. How concerned were they about sovereignty and respecting rights and rights owners?
We had this honor to be working with extremely conservative industry. It could be surprising, but this industry has been very slow to adopt and navigate AI over the last like 10 years or so. And when it comes to using our technology, the way when we start, the stage when we start to be engaged with the client is actually the stage where concerns are away. So we clarify it on our end that they're doing everything ethically as we need them to do it. So the permission is in place or is going to be obtained. They got the right data to be working on this project, and the content they are doing is aligned with the way how we see the technology should be presented, as well as the interpretation of the technology is being driven in the right way from our clients. And they look at us as a vendor and as at some craftsmanships, right? So it's not just a technology we ship to our clients. We also ship these white glove services, sound services, when we have those models and we squeeze whatever best we can squeeze from the state-of-the-art voice models in order to deliver what they need to deliver. So in case of Brady Corbett with The Brutalist, he needed Adrian Brody and Felicity Jones to sound with perfect Hungarian. And they were going through accent coaching for like 12 months or so, and they made themselves sound really good, but it was not native enough. So they used our technology on top of that. And Brady was very loud about exactly how they use technology. And in the cases when directors like Jon Favreau in Mandalorian or Brady Corbett or others like in the Batman movie, for instance, they're talking about the technology up front, explaining how exactly they used it to enhance humans, there's no controversy. It's very clear. I mean, Adrian Brody got his Oscar for his performance because performance is his. Big studios with big lawyers, they could have some challenges navigating because first there is, they're somewhat limited in terms of awareness of what technology is. They think about that in some cases as just an AI, which is not the way how you think about the technology these days. AI is very different, so you need to go deeper. And they are scared a lot. This industry is driven by fear. The fear is coming from like Adrian Brody, Tom Hanks, you name them, and it's coming from studio lawyers. Therefore, the navigation, the adoption curve is just started. But we see them finally putting together AI strategies. And part of those AI strategies is something that we are interested in is synthetic voice. So they start to dig deeper and they start to adapt. And the way how they do that from the fear perspective, which is actually the good thing for the industry as a whole. It's a hard thing for a startup acting in this industry.
I can imagine. So, Ridhima, how does that sound to you if you compare to the Indian context? I mean, the numbers you were showing were massive as well, so your industry is wide. So how important is sovereignty for your industry?
I think it's massively important because I think both of you also just mentioned as well, as an artist or as a creative, if you're going to be playing around with these AI models, you want an ethical framework put in place. You want to make sure that your work is not going to be put in there and essentially stolen by someone else, or you're not going to be fairly compensated for what you're giving. So I think having that sovereign framework in place is really important to have that transparency, so that artists or beyond artists or anyone in different industries can feel like they can contribute to these models and play with these models and feel like they can be fairly dealt with as well, and feel like that work isn't going to be scraped essentially by someone else. And I think these, not to say that open innovation is not important and that, other people from different nations cannot use, different models, but frameworks are really important to be put in place, and that when you work with these companies, there should be that governance, there should be those legalities, there should be that transparency, and I think that is the main point for us. Now, the numbers, like I said, were huge. That probably requires a vast amount of data that you've had to have access to while doing the training or fine-tuning or however you use it. How did you acquire that data, and how did you sort out the big mess with the rights and the rights holders? For us, we've literally been working on this for the past 50 years. This has been our business. We've built, made these films, acquired these films. It's you know, we have a distribution model, we have a co-production model, we have a production model, and we literally own all the rights. So for us, it's really ethical and transparent. It's all legal in the paperwork. And I think that it doesn't really matter now how much data you need. It's about nuanced models. It's about the quality of that data. So it really, you know, it really in the future is not going to matter how much data you're aggregating to be able to train these models, but the output is going to depend on what the quality of that data truly is. And that's why we've built large cultural models in that sense, because the quality of our data is really strong, and the nuances of how we've picked up what the culture needs to be known as is very strong. Therefore, the output can be much, much stronger. And I think the future is people wanting to use these niche nuanced models rather than being able to access larger models because they want very specific outputs from them.
So how do I know if some piece of content is quality training material? I mean, what are the criteria for quality material?
I think it's not something the end user is going to be questioned to or be able to know that, right? It's about the technical team. So for us, all of our data we know is of high quality. It's all in 4K. We've meta tagged it. We've separated all the data, checked all of it. There will be, of course, some super old films that we've had to deal with, some archive films that may be from like the 50s in that sense, you know, that we're actually in the process of restoring to be able to be of quality, to be able to meta tag it and be able to use our models to train it. So it each depends on what you really want from your model. Is it an image model? Is it a text model? Is it a voice model? What is your requirement? And then you can assess the quality based on that, and you can assess how it needs to be restored to be able to use to train the models based on that.
And do you acquire like new data? So what I mean is like if there are people in the audience who have films or catalogs and they're trying to wonder if there's value in it, so should they come and talk to you?
Absolutely. We're always looking for new stories. I think everything that we're building now from a studio perspective, which we'll touch upon more in the next coming weeks of what our new slate is going to be, is very AI native, but hybrid in the approach as well. But we're always looking to support new stories and support new filmmakers who actually want to dare to do something different. I think why we're implementing AI so heavily from this perspective is not just because we want to be in the trend and in the now, because that's the new buzzword that everyone's talking about, but we believe that this can really transform the way people create, and I think it really gives people an opportunity to dare to dream differently. You know, I think in the rigid frameworks of creativity, people didn't have opportunities, people were limited, you know, people don't often get to be able to have millions of dollars to fund their visions and their dreams and their films, or have access to studios or distributors. But now with AI, it sets that benchmark so everyone can have that ability, and our doors are always open to hear from people like that.
Well, Paul, you've also been training models, so how do you get your data?
It's a great question. There's so much I want to
dig
into on the India side, because I last year I spent some time there, and what kept coming up while I was out there was that the matter of representation, how diverse and dense India is, that a lot of the people that were coming up to me and saying like, oh, I want to train my own models because the streets around me, like I can't put in this kind of, architecture or this kind of plant or whatever. It's just not tagged in these large models that are like sort of Western centric. They're all trained by, or a lot of the bigger ones are trained by American companies. And so they don't have that level of nuance. So I think it's very exciting what you're doing, and I hope more countries are pursuing that. How we acquire data, I wasn't necessarily on the front lines of like picking up the phone and calling, but it was everything from even my own personal library of work, other filmmakers' work, and then there's data brokers now as like basically middlemen. As well as libraries. There's lots of film libraries. And so everything kind of has this like provenance to the original creator. And it works essentially like how you would be compensated for like licensing stock footage or something like that. I think there are other models that we could develop in the future that are even inference-based, where you could even more intelligently track the DNA source of the output to the, whatever thousands of cornucopia of data that that were the source for that output, and figure out a better payment system there. But I will say our payment system was pretty fair, and it costs. I think they spent about $50 million licensing data. So yeah, and then on top of that, then there was bespoke models where we would be training for specific people, and they would own those kind of offshoot fine-tuned models themselves, where we wouldn't be like necessarily putting that data into our model. So yeah, I don't know if that answers it.
Yeah, and so what I'm thinking is that if I would be, I'm actually not a creator, but if I was a creator, I would love to use, for example, the model that you're building, or your model, and have my kind of like personal artistic touch on it. What would be a significant or like, I don't know, smallest possible amount of short footage that I would have to have in order to train it and really fine tune it to replicate my style?
Yeah, I mean, depends on what your style is. It depends on what your.
It's beautiful.
You would probably like if it's nuanced and beautiful. I think you're gonna need a lot.
But what's a lot? Like 1,000 hours?
But I mean, we trained a cinema model on. So I put my material into the foundational model, Mary. And then on top of that, we trained multiple kind of offshoots. One was trained on a short film I just released last week called The Most Perfect Person. And I think we trained about 15 minutes, or no, maybe like 12 minutes of footage from that film to make a kind of a LoRa model of that. And we're able to replicate the look of it like pretty quickly. For image models, I'd say under 50 images or under. So again, a lot of the work we do in animation is working with an artist to develop that kind of original set of concept art, character art, kind of style guidance, style exploration. And we usually get around 50 images of original artwork and train on top of that. So I'd say 10 to 15 minutes of footage, which is relatively small, and yeah, 50 images.
Yeah, that's surprisingly small. I would imagine it's hours or hundreds of hours or something. Would you agree?
I would definitely agree, but it also, as he said, depends on the nature of the content that you're making. Like, I'll just give you a small example. We essentially are making this mythology slate of films that we're seen through the lens of sci-fi fantasy, and with that, we've managed to do in 1 week what would have resulted in probably about 9 months of work minimum with VFX and manpower and time. Instead of probably needing about a team of 15 people to do it, that's one person's work. So I think what you said is pretty accurate about 50 images. Also depends what those images are, right? Like, are you prompting to make those images? Those images can then become like a video of 5 seconds, and then eventually you can stitch that together, right, to make your generated output. But we're working with some young filmmakers, and they've literally made within 3 days a short film that probably would have taken, I would say, a couple of months to stitch together and shoot. So the possibilities are really endless, and it depends on your creativity, how good of a prompter you are, how creative you are. It's not just like, as in the fireside chat mentioned, it's not like anyone can just pick up AI and use it and make something fantastic. It's a skill as well, and you have to be able to train yourself. But the base is easier to reach and faster to reach.
And
Yeah.
do you also develop tools? Do you also develop tools to use these models? So
Yes.
basically, yeah.
We have our own tools, our AI tools, and we actually launched our creator platform earlier in February this year, where we're essentially giving people access to all of our IPs and giving them access to AI tools so they can play around with it, and the IP sort of lives on beyond the life of just the film. The characters can live on and be reimagined essentially in any view that the creator wants them to be.
I was just going to add to the kind of density of data of like why we've narrowed it down to about 15 minutes and 50 images, is because this is like one model that sits among many, like a family of models. So that would be like for one character or one location, and then that would sit, within a family of a style model, and they all kind of work together. So it's really about like fine tuning and narrowing the paths of journey. So you actually like don't want, if you're trying to have a very specific kind of aesthetic and DNA in the final output, you don't want it to be very broad. You actually want it to be very targeted in what it's looking at.
And does all this apply to voice as well? Is that, are we in the ballpark that I can do something with 15 minutes or?
Yeah, I mean, in our case, we solve way more narrow problem. So as Paul said, we have to be very targeted. In our case, we are extremely targeted in order to get a particular performance, a particular identity, a particular naturalness of the sound of a particular person in order to make the sound output that can get into Dolby Atmos. So was our initial thesis when we found the company. So our goal was to make the sound that could get into Dolby Atmos synthetic voice and make it ethically and right. We were forced in this industry to work with very small amounts of data. Therefore, our models vary a lot. So if we have a couple of hours of good voice recordings, we can create a very good generalized model for a particular persona. And it would sound very good on the edges of emotions. So they would sing opera, they would whisper, they would cry, they would scream. And that was the particular direction Respeecher was pushing their models towards, to extend the range of emotions without compromising quality, identity, naturalness. But now we basically sit on top of this zoo of very different models. And there are some first cases in Hollywood movies where some of the zero-shot models are being used in final mix. So it's already there. And we can do zero-shot. Zero-shot means like basically no training. So there is a very little exposure to the training data. At the same time, when it comes to archival data, it's another completely different procedure. So when we have to work like with the cases like Luke for Mando, where the data was from tape with this tape hiss, or we had to do this voices of Shackleton and his team for the film Endurance that was taken from Vox cylinders, the very first voice recording devices. There is quite a lot of data preparation happening in advance, and we need as much of data as possible, but we often end up having dozens of minutes of that. And we have to experiment with additional synthesizing of data for our models to perform in particular aspects. Also, we were forced by the nature of our projects to be very deep into transfer learning for our models. So we had to explore how we would make this particular character that had back then no whispering in the data set to whisper. And we actually had to record whispering data sets, license those whispering data sets, and then apply this transfer knowledge to a particular character. Right now, it's not that big of a problem for the industry in general, just because models are way more generalized, but getting to the point where they are precise enough and controllable enough in order to use them in high-end, in production, they still should be small. And what's cool about that, it gives us now very unfair advantage, good advantage when it comes to comparing us to like big mass market products. So those big mass market products, they have significant challenges with ethics of the models that's been trained, with ethics of the usage of those products in general. There have been plenty of cases of misuse, unfortunately. But additionally to that, they basically scraped all the internet to build the foundational models. It does not get to the point of quality where it gets usable. And those models are big. Inference is heavy. We just recently ported our inference on device, on the phone, and just recently conducted some experiments on doing inference on CPU. And it actually works, and it works in real time. So having those small models ethical models could give some additional very cool technical advantages in order to be small, in order to be deployable, in order to require less resource.
So now we've understood that sovereignty is about people wanting to have control over their data, their content, and how it's been used. Even small amounts of content are enough to kind of like start giving AI your personal flavor. And but from like a more larger cultural perspective, Ridhima, you probably tested sort of a generic and more bigger models. Where do they fail? What goes wrong if you use your sort of like generic models in your work?
I don't like to use the word fail because I think they've done some really wonderful things for us, and I too, and I'm sure a lot of you use them in your day-to-day life for a lot of tasks. So I think it's really pushed the boundaries, and I think where they probably are missing something is the fact that they're not specific on culture, right? And I think that's what our chairman brought up in his keynote, that when he was trying to make a Diwali greeting and he wanted to use the goddess Lakshmi, it made Lakshmi dance very inappropriately, not like how, you know, a religious figure would dance. And I think that's because it's just unaware of the cultural nuances. So I think that's where it's really missing the gap on the specifics, on the ethics, on the transparency, on those frameworks. And for us, and I think, as you said as well, I think data separation and making sure data is good is probably the most laborious part of being able to train your models efficiently. For us, we believe our data captures those specifics really well. Like, for example, when I was trying to make something about streets in Chennai and just test some models, some of the public models out there, the language that was written on the road, as you mentioned as well, Paul, was completely wrong. They had made their faces look completely different to, you know, firstly they duplicated their faces, so there was like 3 of the same people on the street, and it just looked kind of ridiculous. So where they're missing all of this is just because of these specific nuances and being able to go to these different cultures and be able to get correct data from them. So I think that's what I think they're missing. But technically, I think they're super sound, and I think that if these things are put into place, we'll see a very transformational scenario.
So Paul, do you only use sovereign models in your work?
Do I
Only use sovereign
only
models?
use? I mean, right now we're using anything that we can train on our own machines. But in terms of like per project, everything we do has a custom model associated with it, or at least a couple. I think another way, you know, to maybe define it is what are the other inputs that you're bringing besides the model. I think we see the model as like one step in the process, but a lot of the inputs are motion that we're designing, whether it's performance or it's actual traditional animation. That becomes both training data that allows us to kind of like expedite or kind of accelerate, like on a curve, the production, so that we kind of front load a lot of the work with that manual labor, and then train on that, and then use additional 2D or 3D animation that gets rendered through AI. So it's still like kind of handcrafted, but it's just being kind of rendered or kind of getting this polish pass through our custom model. I have trained a custom model with my wife's paintings, and so that's like a piece that she owns, and she's an oil painter, but we were able to train a video model based on her oil paintings, and now this was a medium that was kind of off limits to her in the past, just the nature of her aesthetic and style is so detailed. It would be extremely difficult to scale that frame by frame, to do oil paintings frame by frame. And so now she has this model that she can take one of her paintings, see it come to life, or explore the world that she's kind of created. So I think, as a studio, we want to be able to provide additional routes for artists to see their work come to life. Did another project with Paul Flores and this project for the music artist Kuko. And that model that we trained on Paul Flores's work, we've then used it 2 other times, and he's been compensated for those additional uses.
That sounds like a lot of work. Don't you ever feel a little bit lazy or have a little guilty pleasures and
Yes.
try a VO or some other model and say,
Right.
ooh, that's nice?
Yes, the way we use, I think people are surprised when they come to our studio Asteria and expect a quick turnaround because we're doing so much traditionally still. It is much slower, for sure. But I think what we're delivering is something that is controlled, it's crafted, it's employing traditional VFX artists, traditional animators, and so so it's very much sits in this hybrid category where it's not leaning too heavily on the generative side to do the heavy lifting, but it's also alleviating some of the tedious tasks or upping the production value of traditional animation. And I think it's this sort of middle road, and it's not going to allow us to move as fast, but I think the work that we're doing, we can come away from it feeling much more proud of it.
And would you say that your technology or your models are as good as the cutting edge models that come out from these big tech companies?
I think text to video, text to image is the sort of one of the that's the least that we do with touching the AI models. That's probably lower on the totem pole of how we interact with AI is just text to whatever output. So in that sense, if you're judging it from a just text to video standpoint, it's going to be less performative than if I were to do a sketch or if I were to animate a camera or to have someone perform or whatever it is. That's where you see the benefits of the model is that it adheres to the input. A lot of what we do also is kind of crafting worlds in three dimensions. So we're creating Gaussian splats of environments, kind of doing virtual production, and then re-rendering that through the model. So I think the trade-off of not doing things that are just text to video or text to image is this level of control or feeling like the hand operation of something. And that's not, if you're judging it on performance based on control, I think our approach does kind of have a higher benchmark than the level of control you get from these text models.
So it's your style and it's even better.
Yes, and yeah, I think you can feel, on the live action stuff that we do, we've done a lot of hand operated movements. We're working on a documentary right now where we're bringing archival imagery that's never been seen before back to life, and we're sort of capturing these moments in time, restoring them, and then literally grabbing a camera and operating this camera through this kind of frozen moment in time. And I think that does translate to the audience versus these sort of just fully synthetic camera movements. And so, yeah, I think it's really about trying to create something that resonates with people, that gets outside of just, I could see how they did that, to feeling like there's actually a person behind it versus this automated process.
It actually resonates a lot with what we see in synthetic voice. So there are basically 2 approaches how you can synthesize a voice using speech-to-speech when you have a human who is performing, and then you apply the model to this human performance in order to make him sound as a different human. And there are text-to-speech, the models we are all familiar with, that are becoming better and better. And right now, the general quality of the output of text-to-speech model is pretty good. So it can get to high end at some point, but I do not see it being widely used in high end because humans are best to perform. And humans are being enhanced with those models to remove the limitation they have, like their voice, the particular vocal apparatus they own, and the knowledge they have, like knowledge of languages or ability to perform, like sing in the register they cannot physically sing. Text-to-speech, even if we imagine like this dream text-to-speech that could be directable, so you can say it in a human language how you want it to perform, it still would be harder process for a director of the movie to actually direct text-to-speech, even if all those triggers are in place to be pulled, than just to say to a human who actually understands their job, how they need to perform. And there is some magic happens when humans start to perform, when humans start to get in the mood, when humans actually deliver this performance through the microphone, and then models are not touching the performance, they're just changing the vocal apparatus to make it sound different. And among like 300 of our high-end projects, like films, TVs, video games, 99% of those are speech-to-speech. And only those that required significant scale, like TV level scale or Olympics game scale, text-to-speech was used.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
So, no, I was just going to say, I think the point everyone is trying to make is that all of this has to be authentic, right? And I think what the AI tools bring us is just enhancements, is bring us these transformations that perhaps were not possible before, but it has to be deeply authentic. And one of the voice models, say, we're working on as well is that you can speak in any style you want and then layer the character's voice on top of that. But that voice still also has to come from you to get that emotion out, to make sure that it is really authentic. Nobody wants AI slop, right? I think that it's just contributing to slop and doom scrolling. It has to have that deeply human voice behind it and making sure that AI is really just transforming it.
But do you see that there are trade-offs in using your model compared to using whatever top-notch model are coming out from big tech players?
Well, I think for us, ours is our IP, right? That's what makes it more nuanced, and that's what makes it cultural. So I feel that if someone wants to come to us, that's what they'll really, really, really get. And then eventually, the more data that's plugged into that, and the more people that are creating more stories and more content over time, will also make our models smarter. So there will be, of course, trade-offs. I don't think we're trying to compete with the next biggest LLM, and that requires hundreds and millions of dollars or so, and they've done a significant amount of work. But we're doing it just differently and culturally nuanced.
So what about future? If we read news about AI development, we read a lot about consolidation and big companies buying big companies or buying parts of big companies and owing, and it gets really, really murky. And in the end, it looks like there's going to be like one or two with, I don't know, some post-human level intelligence and all of that. Do you believe that there's room for small models in the future as well? And do you believe that it's worth kind of picking your own path and training your own models also in the future?
Definitely. And I think we've been seeing that, to be honest, over the past couple of years, that no matter what these big tech companies are developing, there's these young startups emerging that are just focusing on their niches, and not just from the creator and developer perspective, but from an audience perspective too. People are wanting to search for their niche, and it's maybe harder to discover content and harder to discover the things they like, but there is that give and take on both sides. And whilst that will continue to happen, consolidation will continue to happen, there will constantly be people trying, like I think most of these companies as well, the big companies that we see today were just started in a room by one person, one young person who dared to dream, and that same thing's going to happen continuously.
Yeah, I agreed 100%. As much as this bubble is going to start to, like, the pieces are going to start to fall, and companies will consolidate, it is still important for companies to to have their niches and for people to be able to express themselves in a way that is like that represents their actual voice. I think these large models are, they're built on, they kind of accelerate from averages, and I think they start to create this monoculture of aesthetic that that the slop that people are reacting to is based on these large models and these companies not having an understanding of what nuance is. As much as they can perform or give the illusion of film or of animation, there's nothing specific about it. And so it's if this technology, as they say, is inevitable, that there's nothing we can do to stop it, I think the onus is on these smaller companies to kind of put up a bit of a blocker and say, actually, no, we're going to take this into our own hands and show you what happens when artists and people that are not represented do have a seat at the table, and here's how we usher this technology in properly. So I think it's still worth like fighting for, to have these kind of bespoke models and these bespoke approaches to using AI. Otherwise, everything's going to be, this kind of like flat line of culture.
What about Alex? Do you believe that there's room for small players in the future as well?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, what we see that high-end industry, that's theatrical type of content, is not something that can be realistically addressed with very much generalized models, right? So that's why we are building the stuff we are building. That's why studios are looking into niche solutions and into groups of those niche solutions based on the right models, on the right core models, trained in the right way. But additionally to that, in our work, we see that synthetic voice AI in general, now traveled quite far from entertainment in terms of variety of use cases it's being used for. And when real-time text-to-speech started to sound really, really good, people started to build all the agentic experience based on that. We now have some traction in automotive industry, because automotive industry is struggling with voice interfaces and they need to build actively. We have healthcare traction that is also using our models to help people with like laryngectomy, to speak better. And all those use cases, they address pretty niche problems to be solved. And when we got ourselves involved in those things, we always underestimate how hard would it be. Because for us, we are a small startup. We have to be focused, right? But we see, look, we have to be involved in this laryngectomy thing because it's important, right? We have to be doing that. And we probably can do it like 20% of R&D resource dedicated to it. Hell yeah, no. It takes way more, so we have those projects usually read on our P&L when we are getting engaged in things like that. And therefore, when we think about other cultural aspects like languages, it's a massive problem for global models to address those. I mean, whenever we hear whatever output of synthetic voice, say in Ukrainian, it just sounds bad. And there is no incentive for big voice AI companies to address those particular languages which are niche. And 90% of languages in our world are niche, and this is our culture, right? We are losing it. They're all dying. In India, we have like 400 languages and only 4 of them are active. And no one cares from the global voice AI community about the other languages. And in order to build those models that would address the language that right now is being spoken by 500,000 of people, you need a different approach than scrape all the data available on the internet and throw it there, train a big fat GPU and hope it works. It wouldn't work. It needs some craft on the data end. Therefore, there is quite significant room across the industries and use cases we see for synthetic voice, and across language-specific models we also see in synthetic voice.
So I'm convinced. So first of all, by using sovereign models, I get to use my own handwriting in my work. I get control over my data, and I get control over how my work is being reproduced, and I can protect my own culture and features in it. Thank you so much, Alex Saduk from Respeecher, Paul Trillo from Asteria, and Ridhima Lulla from Eros Innovation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.